Looks like we got 37 participants online right now. So let's go ahead and start. My name is Tina Sancamaro, the president of 2022 Chinese Real Estate Association of America, CREAA. I would like to thank you so much for attending our webinar today, and you know, appreciate all your being here. I would also want to show you know, just let you know that we have, you know, events coming up, and if you're interested in any of those, just, you know, make sure you know, pay attention to the email that we send out to you, and we will send out the notification once the dates are confirmed and you know, close to the day. Next slide. Yes, I also want to acknowledge our officers and our board of directors. And I do see Sonia is here, which is our Vice President of External Affairs. Just want to make sure that she say hi to everyone. Next slide. I'm not going to read through all the names, so so we'll have our those are all our officers: Gogo, Edwin, Ted, Nathan, Annie. Also, I want to thank our board of directors as well. Next slide. I do want to give acknowledgement and appreciation to all our sponsors, including Guarantee Mortgage, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, U.S. Bank, San Francisco Association of Realtors, Marcus and Millichaps, Bank of West, Bank of Orient, SEP Preservation, and Berry Real Estate. And thank you so much for your support. Next slide. Okay, so
this is something that I put just as a reminder. I'll flash it up again later on during the presentation, but for those folks that are coming on right now, just want to give you a quick summary as to how we're going to share the information today. So, you know, next to my head is a link that says, you know, linktr.ee/CREAA. So the links are there to, you know, download Dan's slides and to submit any questions for Q&A today. And then, of course, after we're done today, we're going to upload the, you know, the video to YouTube, and then put a link out there for you to see the replay if you like to, if you miss anything or you'd love to see Dan's presentation again. So during Q&A, we're going to you know, give these three options to submit questions. Going in this priority. So we'll take questions from the forum first, then any questions, text it to Rebecca, and then raise your hand to unmute yourself. Okay, so that is going to be the you know, way we're going to do Q&A. During the presentation, I might just pop up this sort of little message via the poll feature. So if you see something popping up on your screen, it's basically this little reminder, because I figure some folks are going to join in later, so I want them to kind of see this stuff. Okay, so I will go to the next slide, and will be.
Hi, this is Rebecca White, and I am events chair for the Chinese Real Estate Association for 2022. You're more than welcome to read Dan's bio, and I just want to say a few words about him, having served on the board of directors with SFAR with Dan for the last couple of years. I've actually known more of Dan than I've known him, because his reputation definitely precedes him. He's successful, brilliant, and hilarious. A few years back, I got to know him on a little more personal level when I'd run into him when I was walking my dog, or he and his dog, Happy, were in the park as well. And despite being our president-elect and then SFAR president, Dan's always down to earth and very approachable. Now, there are a few people who know him better than I do, so I did reach out to a few mutual friends to get some insight into Dan. And one thing I learned about Dan from Jeannie Gant is he likes black and white cookies. And that's why sometimes when you go to SFAR events, they give us the cookies that are half chocolate icing on one side and half vanilla icing on the other, and that's thanks to Dan. Another interesting story about Dan comes from Walt. I mean, Dan is an attorney, he's a manager, He has this really kind of conservative facade. But Walt said once when he let Dan drive his 1969 740 HP Roadrunner. And Walt said Dan left the gas station at 120 miles per hour. So despite Dan seeming serious and very knowledgeable, he's also a bit of a wild child and has an incredibly humorous and very personable approach to everything. And that's why when we realized we had to talk about paperwork, which I hate contracts, I hate paperwork, I could not think of anyone better than Dan to talk about this normally boring, but not boring with Dan subject. So Dan, it's on you now. Take it away.
Boy, oh boy, there's some things there that I'm going to write down. I think I might have them put on that gravestone. I liked it. Thank you very much. Somehow we forgot handsome. I don't know.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
I didn't say handsome. Oh my God. Well, that goes without saying, Dan.
Oh, I appreciate
it. It goes without saying.
If you can see me, unfortunately, you probably know that photo is about 5 years out of date, but what are you going to do? Anyhow, I am grateful to be here. I have a lot of knowledge in forms. I was on this forms committee and chaired the CAR forms committee and chaired the San Francisco forms committee a number of years, and was on the task force that spent 2 years revising this RPA. So away we go. I am not, by the way, if you know me, you know that I'm not afraid of the subject matter. I am afraid a little bit of the technology. So I'm about to share screen. That's my only trepidation. Here we go. Oh, that's a good sign so far. That's another good sign. Oh, no, I feel like we're getting somewhere. Okay, can you see my screen? All right, excellent. Okay, so here's what we have. We are going to start with the San Francisco form, and I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. And we're going to go through the San Francisco form and talk about its updates. Then we're going to go through the CAR RPA, and then if time permits, we're going to compare the two and contrast the two. So there are some differences, of course, between the CAR RPA and the San Francisco RPA. And if we don't end up having enough time for that, it's in the materials that Reagan has presented for all of us, so you can take a look at that comparison. All right, so let's start with the San Francisco Purchase Agreement. What has changed? Well, there's little changes. I'm happy to say only 8 of them. And so where does it start? Well, it starts with us being a little proactive. Starting in July, there's a statewide law that says we need to provide something called a Fair Appraisal Act addendum. And what is that? Well, it's a notice to buyers and to sellers, I suppose, but particularly to buyers, that we've experienced lots of appraisal discrimination in the past, right? And we're, of course, very worried about that appraisal discrimination. And so there's an advisory that explains if you feel as though you're experiencing appraisal discrimination, what do you do? Well, there's a phone number and, oh, why can't I advance the slide? Oh boy. Sorry. Trying to advance my slide. Oh, okay. When I made a smaller screen, it'll let me advance my slide. Anyhow, there is a phone number and a little bit of a display here, a little bit of a warning what this is all about when it goes into effect, which is July 2022. And so those of you who use the San Francisco Purchase Agreement, you'll see that this is now bundled and attached. It will be bundled and attached to the CAR RPA, but not until the next revision date of our various forms, which is the end of June. Okay? All right, next one. And this, by the way, is the language that's inside of that fair appraisal warning, and it explains who you call and what website you can go to if you experience any discrimination. All right. Next, what else did we change? Well, paragraph 9, you may remember, is the paragraph that says, hey, all fixtures are included and the following personal property items, right? And then in 9B, you can check boxes and say, we want these additional personal property items. And then in 9C, you can list things that would otherwise be included, but that you are excluding. Well, what about mirrors, right? So we've always had this big question about mirrors, and the CAR RPA also addresses this in its newest form. The CAR RPA says all bathroom mirrors are going to be included in the sale. So even if the bathroom mirror is not affixed to the wall, says the CAR RPA, it is included. And of course, that's problematic when we have staging items, right? But the San Francisco purchase agreement says that only items owned by the seller are transferring to the buyer, and of those, the following, and then it goes through what those are. And one of the things that it now covers very explicitly is it says that all affixed mirrors. And so what does that do by definition? It says that if it's not an affixed mirror, it's hanging there, it is not included in the sale. You would have to know to write it in, okay? Next. Oh, also under leased and liened items, that's paragraph 10, there's a bit of a rewording that acknowledges the existence of service agreements. This paragraph requires that within 3 days, the seller provide to the buyer all of the contracts, leases, and service agreements related to leased or liened items. And what are some good examples of that? Anything that's on a PACE loan or a HERO loan, right? That would often be financing for windows, other improvements like solar power, that's most common, right? Anything that's energy efficient. And then if you're selling in a more rural setting, often you'll have leased or liened items such as natural gas tanks, okay? Next, closing costs and allocations. So different from the CAR form that has lots of little boxes to check to say who pays for what, the San Francisco form has paragraph 11 that says who pays for what. It says, for instance, that the seller pays for the transfer taxes, the buyer pays for the escrow fees, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, it requires that a whole bunch of things be prorated and brought up to speed at the time of closing. One of those things that needs to be prorated and brought up to date at the time of closing would be the regular HOA dues. But for whatever reason, that was missing. And so now it's explicitly put here in the contract. Among the other things that need to be prorated and brought up to date at close of escrow are the regular HOA dues. Okay. Moving on to paragraph 12. Well, paragraph 12, a lot of you know as the inspection contingency. But of course, that's not quite right. It's more than inspections. It's our investigation contingency. And so the word investigation has been added. A few years ago, we changed this to show buyer's due diligence. Now we have both phrases in there, buyer's due diligence and investigations, okay? And so there's a whole list of here what the buyer can investigate during their quote unquote inspection contingency period. And what can they? Well, they can do whatever they want. But one of the things that it reminds us of is that some of those items are not just the physical items having to do with the property, but what about adequate property insurance, neighborhood issues, matters affecting the property like title issues, or, and now you see here in yellow, or its intended use. So how does your client intend to use this property? Do they think that they can convert it from a single family home into 2 units, or from 2 units into a single family home, for instance? And so now that is explicitly stated here as one of their investigations, okay? So what about invasive testing, like test holes from the pest inspector? This has always been a sore subject, and because it's a sore subject, the forms committee decided to give you some guidance. And so that guidance now says no invasive testing is allowed, including, quote, test holes without seller's written consent. And it also goes on to remind us that buyer is responsible for damage caused by the buyer's inspectors and during the buyer's inspections, okay? All right, next one. Oh yeah, this is interesting. So this is paragraph 13. Paragraph 13 has to do with homeowners associations, condominiums, for instance. So if there is an HOA, if the property is a condo, either of those, then paragraph 13 is the contingency that requires the seller to provide all the various documents to the buyer and gives the buyer a contingency period to review them and in good faith walk away from the contract. But what often happens? Well, what often happens is that things change. So if we have a long escrow or even a typical 30-day or 21-day escrow, and if in the middle of that escrow we get new documents from the HOA, The seller, of course, is obligated to provide those to the buyer. But now the question is, can the buyer take those documents, read them, and say, I want to cancel the contract and I want my deposit back? So now we have some more language in here that talks about material changes to the CC&Rs, material changes to the reserve study, or to other HOA documents will provide a new, updated, reinstated condo contingency for the buyer to review those materials and then walk away in good faith and get their deposit back. Now, what if it's not a change to any of those documents and it's not material? And for those of you who are screaming at the screen right now, what does material mean? Unfortunately, good luck, we can't tackle that one. That's going to be sometimes just a lawyer fight. But at least we specify material so you can say, no, this is an immaterial change. This is nothing. But the question then becomes, what about the HOA dues? What if they go up? So if the HOA dues were $565, and now we get notice before close of escrow that next year they're going to be $585. They've gone up 20 bucks. Does that let the buyer get out of this contract? Well, it explicitly says here that the HOA dues, any increase in the dues that's not 10% or more is not material. The buyer has no further contingency rights. But if the HOA increase is 10% or more, then they do in fact get a new contingency and they can decide if they wish to proceed or cancel the contract. Or if checked, you can put in an actual amount. So you could actually, in making an offer, check this box and put in an amount like 50 bucks or 500 bucks, right? Depending on your threshold. And of course, the seller could counter this depending on what the buyer inserts here and says, no. If the dues go up, you're going to be taking the responsibility no matter how much. Okay? I keep wanting to say any questions here, but I know we're going to do questions later. Okay, what about the MLS? So this is a real source of frustration, and I think you'll really like this. Who's experienced this in the past? Just before close of escrow, the buyer is insistent, or maybe even after close of escrow, the buyer is insistent that the listing agent take down all of the photos, right? And maybe even cancel the MLS listing because, quote, privacy reasons. Well, unfortunately, that's ridiculous and ineffective. Removing the photos from the MLS, by the way, may be a violation of the civil code. That's in here, but it's also terribly ineffective because they're already out on the internet. They're everywhere, right? The moment they go out on a VOW or an IDX feed, they're everywhere. And by removing them from the MLS, it's all you're doing is hurting other real estate agents who rely on the MLS to, in fact, run comps. And if you don't have photos, how do you run comps, right? It's just not very helpful. So this is now an acknowledgement that the parties consent to the publication of images, floor plans, descriptions, transaction terms into the MLS, into other websites, and that the agents are not a party to this contract and are not promising to remove photos from the MLS or from their own personal brokerage websites. And then it gives a civil code section, and you can point to that civil code section and say, listen, it may even be against the law. But between you and me, what that civil code section says is that the MLS has to retain this information for 3 years. It doesn't really say anything about you removing or not removing photos before close of escrow. Okay? All right, let's go on. Oh, did we do it? Or do we have that same problem? Hold on one second. Okay. And I think this is our last change. For whatever reason, and I'm not sure why, we used to have here at the very last page where the seller signs and accepts the offer or checks this box and rejects the offer and issues a counter offer. We used to have another box that you could check to say, see the attached backup offer addendum. And I think the idea there was if you check that box, you're not accepting the contract, but you're proposing a backup offer addendum. For whatever reason, our forms committee decided the better approach was to remove that checkbox. And so now if you want to put someone in backup, you check the box here that says subject to the counteroffer. And in the counteroffer, you write, we're offering the buyer a backup position per the attached backup offer addendum, and then you attach it to the counteroffer. Okay. All right, that is it. We did it with respect to the San Francisco purchase agreement changes. I am going to, good. I'm going back to my home screen here, which hopefully you see, and we're going to pull up the CAR contract. Reagan, can we see this? Boy, I'm hoping that people see this. Okay, hopefully everybody's with us. Reagan, everybody with us?
We're good.
Okay, great. I just need a little feedback. I appreciate it. I got scared there for a minute. All right, let's look at the new car purchase agreement. So we're going to look at the grid, and you're going to say, what's the grid? Well, we're going to tell you. We're going to talk about what's staying the same and what's changing, and then we're going to show you some gotchas. Those are items that have flipped, that are different than they used to be, something you should really look out for. So introduction to the grid. What is the grid? Well, before I let you look at the grid, and there's a sneak peek. Before I let you look at the grid, and there's a sneak peek, I want to remind us that we used to have something called a summary of offer. And for those of you who use the summary of offer, you're thinking to yourself, wow, that was a great tool. What it did was once you went into zip forms and you made your offer, you could then, after you make your offer, pull up a form that was called the summary of offer, and it would go through electronically and find all the deal points that you had just typed into zip forms, and it would take them and present them in one page, a summary. And so when the RPA study group met to change the RPA, the big question was, couldn't we just get all of the deal points up front? And that's exactly what happened. So can't we just put all the deal points up front on one page? And the answer was sort of. It took 2.5 pages. So paragraph 3 is the grid. Paragraph 1 is the name of the parties. Paragraph 2 is the confirmation of agency relationships. And then paragraph 3 is everything else. Every single term in this contract is here in the grid. And for those of you who are thinking to yourselves, okay, so this is a summary? No, it is the contract. These are the terms. There is no other place other than here, for instance, in paragraph 3A, to enter the purchase price. That is the term. And as it says right up top here, it says that these are the terms of the contract, but please, there are references to other paragraphs in the contract. This form is 16 pages. Feel free to read the whole thing, okay? And let me show you how it works. So the first thing that it does here is you'll see the gray bar at the top, which tells us, hey, this is the paragraph number. So 3A is purchase price. And then you'll see that 3B is close of escrow, et cetera, et cetera. But each of these also have with them various columns, right? And so if I go here, see that column, that's all the paragraph reference. And then this next column here is where in this contract do we find out more information about this thing? And so this is incredibly helpful. So let's look at 3D1 for a moment. That's the initial deposit amount. So 3D1 establishes that initial deposit amount, but if I go here to paragraph 5A1, I can read more about the requirements for the initial deposit if there is more to read. And in fact, there is. That's why there's a reference here. Okay. And so you now know where all of these things are. Okay. And so what is the next column? Well, this is, sorry, one too far. This is telling you what you're about to read about. It's the purchase price, the close of escrow, expiration of offer, right? This is the description. And the next column here, this is the actual terms. This is where you type in, right? So you type in the purchase price, you type in the close of escrow date, you type in the escrow of the expiration of the offer, you type in the initial deposit amount, the loan amounts, et cetera, et cetera. And is there more information and other choices? Often there is, and that's what this last column is, additional terms, right? Sometimes you can type in here, or sometimes there's nothing else to type in. The close of escrow date is the close of escrow date. There's nothing else to type in, okay? That's the way the grid works. Hopefully you'll find this exciting, and you'll find that it's very, very easy to review an offer, to make an offer, because you don't have to skip around all over the contract to try to find where the terms are, because they were on 10 different pages before. Now they're all here in the grid, which is the first 2.5 pages. Okay? All right. Now what stays the same? And by the way, at the end, we'll come back to the grid and we'll do a little mini fill out. So what stays the same? The transaction process is business as usual, right? The close of escrow dates, the disclosure requirements, closing in possession. You still allocate costs. You still have final verification. You still have a section of definitions. It still allows for electronic signatures. You still have to serve a notice to perform or demand to close before you can cancel. There's still an optional liquidated damages or arbitration clause, right? All of that stays the same. It's just mostly how we fill it out. And then there's some pressure points or some items that were really difficult for the agents that we addressed here. And we're going to try to look at some of those in a moment. Okay, so here's showing you some of the status the same, right? The expiration of the offer, this is now paragraph 3C you're seeing here. It's a snippet from the grid. It's still 3 days, right? 3 days after all signatures at 5 p.m. Or you could put in a date, or you could change that time, right? So the initial deposit, right, still the same, works the same way. 3 business days is the initial deposit, okay? That still works the same. You can still change it. Or if you wanted to change it entirely, you could check this box and start typing here, right? What else still stays the same? Well, you're going to see the same time frames for almost everything. And we're going to give something away. There's one time frame that changes because everything is now 17 days. We'll see that in a minute, okay? What else? Well, this still stays the same, but it's in such a more convenient position. It was true before, and it remains true that there are 2 contingencies that you can remove right here inside the contract. And those 2 contingencies are the loan contingency and the appraisal contingency. And by the way, if you check a box, and there is a box to check that it's an all cash offer, it specifically says you now no longer have a loan contingency. And of course that makes sense, right? So you can still check these boxes, or you could check the contingency removal box, and you see that down here in yellow, and that will attach the contingency removal form, and you can remove any of these other contingencies, okay? And you see now that all of the contingencies are grouped here together. They're all in paragraph 3L. See the gray part of the screen up here, right? That shows them they're all together. So 3L1, 3L2, et cetera, those are your contingencies, and then you read more about them here. So 3L1 is the loan contingency, and you read more about it, paragraph 8A. Tells you all about the loan contingency, when you have to provide proof to the other side of pre-qualification, et cetera, okay? All right. And this stays the same. This is just a reminder that the loan contingency and the appraisal contingency in the CAR contract are considered separate. And if you want an appraisal contingency, you have to have an appraisal contingency. If you remove the appraisal contingency, and the only reason the property is not, the only reason your client is not getting a loan is because it didn't appraise, well, too bad. You can't use the appraisal contingency. Your client would have to put down more money. This has always been there. It's still there. And this has always been there and it's still there, but I'm going to remind you, you know that expression, we're out of contract? I'm sure, Regan, you've heard people say, but we're out of contract. There's no such thing as out of contract. So let's say you had a 15-day investigation contingency, or you sweetened the deal and you made it a 5-day investigation contingency, and now we're on day 8 and you haven't removed the contingency. Can your client, the buyer, still cancel the contract based on a good faith execution of that investigation contingency? Yeah. Why? Because the contract says all contingencies extend and extend and extend until when? And I know that Regan's yelling at the screen, until they serve you with a notice to perform that has a minimum of 2 days And at the conclusion of those 2 days, they can then cancel the contract. But even then, if your buyer was acting in good faith, the contract says they get their deposit back. Okay, so we're not out of contract. We have an active contingency removal. It requires that your client serve a notice to perform to the other side. And so if we have a 5-day contingency and you want to hold them to those 5 days, when do you serve the notice to perform? Well, you serve it on day 3. Can you serve it any earlier? Nope. Our contract says the notices to perform cannot be served more than 2 days earlier, and they can't change the minimum of 2 days. You could make it longer and give them 3 or 5 days to remove their contingency, but always a minimum of 2 days. And that's why it's ironic if someone writes you an offer that says it has a 2-day contingency, can you ever hold them to it? No. Why? Because you couldn't serve. I mean, when are you going to serve them the notice to perform? I guess 5 minutes after you get into contract, right? Because today's day 0, 1, and 2. That's the way you would have to do it. So if someone who serves, makes an offer with a 2-day contingency, and you want to hold them to that 2 days, then 5 minutes after you get into contract, serve them with a notice to perform. It gives them the minimum of 2 days, and it could hold them to that 2-day contingency. Okay, but I guess by definition, if they give you a 1-day contingency, right, they really have at least 2 days. I know, it blows my mind. Okay, so what's changing? So all of the contract negotiation points are moved to the beginning, right? That's what we saw. They're all in the grid. There's no struggle to look through the contract and try to find where the terms are. For those of you who are used to using the San Francisco contract, it'll be a lot easier for you to use the CAR contract now because all of those points are right up front. It gives you the paragraph reference number so you can go and look and read more. So there's no hidden checkboxes or surprises. There's a great reorganization of the paragraphs so they're all together. All of the contingencies you saw were in 3L, and then later in the contract, they're all together in paragraph 8. So it shows all of the contingencies together, right? So your client can know exactly what their contingencies are, and it's also good for you, right? A reminder, oh, I forgot. Yeah, those are our contingencies, okay? The signature paragraphs are reorganized, and check this out. I think you might like this. You know that representative capacity signature disclosure, the RCSD, that says it's a trust or it's an LLC or it's power of attorney, right? Or it's probate, and the person who's signing is really signing in a representative capacity. And we used to check a box and then attach that form. Well, we actually don't have to check a box and attach that form anymore because that form is built into the last page, the signature page. So it's all you do is you write down who's signing, and it would say, for instance, Daniel Hershkowitz, and it asks in what capacity. And excuse me, you'd say Daniel Hershkowitz, comma, trustee, and then it asks trustee of what? And you'd write in the Hershkowitz Family Trust of 2020, okay? And so that RCSD, pardon me, is built right into the contract, okay? And now there's a new real estate broker section that's helpful, and we may have time to talk about this. There's a designated delivery address. So if you are the real estate broker and you want to tell the other side where they should send all of their accepted this, their notices to perform, the documents, the contingency removals, right, all of their contractual requirements, you can actually fill out a box that says send it here, and you can check a box within the box that says and send it to this additional address. Some of you may now be setting up new Gmail accounts, for instance, that is just for this purpose, right? So it could say Dan's contract docs at gmail.com, and you could write that in. And that allows them to send all of that stuff there. And we'll see in a little while why that's super important, okay? Okay, so what else is changing? So one of the things that's changing is all of the contingency periods are 17 days. And so what does that really mean? That means the loan contingency is now 17 days. It used to be 21. Can you do a loan in 17 days? I don't know. But before you filled in or accepted the 21 days, you, as the buyer's agent and the buyer, need to be on the phone with the lender and ask, how long do we need this contingency to be? And so if the answer is more than 17 days, then you simply fill in here another number, right? 21, 25, whatever it is, Okay, all right. Paragraph 4, so we saw paragraph 3, that was all of the terms, right? Paragraph 4 is about attaching stuff, right? Attaching stuff. So what can we attach? Well, we can attach a probate addendum. We could attach a manufactured or mobile home addendum. We could attach something called the tenant occupied property addendum, a TIC addendum, a stock co-op addendum, and all of those are available to you depending on what you're selling. What's really convenient is that there's no longer separate contracts for probate. So there's no longer a probate contract. There's just this contract, the RPA, and a probate addendum. So you don't have to learn both. By having just a 2-page probate addendum, it's much easier to understand what the differences are and account for them, right? Rather than trying to compare 2 10-page contracts, 14-page contracts, one to the other, right? And the same with the mobile home purchase addendum. So what is this tenant occupied property addendum? That's a little bit new. You may remember it in the past, we had the tenant in possession addendum. The old contract used to say that the property was going to be delivered vacant. And if it was going to be delivered with tenants, you'd have to remember to include the tenant in possession addendum. Well, that's really problematic. Why? Because so many tenants have tenant rights. It's very hard to get tenants out. It's not just a coronavirus thing. It's, you know, a rent control and an eviction control thing. There's now statewide eviction controls. So it can be very, very complicated. So every time you have a tenant occupied property, you should be attaching the tenant occupied property addendum. It gives you choices. One of those choices is the seller will act in good faith to try to remove all the tenants. But if the seller is unable to remove all the tenants, then the buyer has to either accept the property with the tenants or cancel the contract. The buyer has a choice. Okay? So that's a big change. That's much more similar to what we see in San Francisco with our paragraph 14. So what if it's a TIC or a stock co-op? You would use this same purchase agreement, and then you would check one of these boxes here in paragraph 4 to add those. Okay, any questions there? Well, you're gonna have to hold on to them, I guess. And then can you attach some addendum? Yes, you can totally attach other addenda here in 4B. You could attach and say, hey, this is actually a backup offer, and you attach the backup offer addendum. For those of you selling out in the country, septic well property monument propane addendum. What if it is a 1031 exchange? Should you simply write into the additional terms section, which is now the very, very end of paragraph 3, paragraph 3R? You could type additional terms. Should you write in there, buyer and seller will cooperate with each other's 1031 exchanges at no expense to the other? No, don't do that. Use the form. There is a form. Attach it by checking this box here, the buyer's intent to exchange, or check this box here, the seller's intent to exchange. Okay? All right. Let's see what else we got. Covered that, covered that. Good. So what about the condition of the property at closing? So we have paragraph 7, and what I'm showing you here is a snippet from paragraph 7. Paragraph 7 is super helpful. It says, listen, here's the condition of the property at closing. And then there's a 1, a 2, and a 3. And the highlighted item is all about the 3. So what's 1? Sold as is. What's 2? The property, including the pool, spa, landscaping, grounds, all of that will be maintained substantially in the same condition as at the date of acceptance, right? So you got to keep the property up. And then 3 is all the debris and personal property not included in the sale will be removed. So you got to clean out the property. You got to take all the paint cans, right? Take the toxic waste with you. Anything that's not specifically included in the sale has to be removed. And then the question has always been, what if they don't remove it? Can we just throw it out? Do we have to like contact them and tell them? What do we do? And so now the highlighted section here in yellow tells the buyer what they do if the seller leaves stuff behind. And it says that there's a contractual promise to remove stuff, and that if the seller does leave stuff behind, the buyer will make some good faith attempt to let them know that they need to remove stuff and give them 3 days to do it. And if they don't thereafter, they can throw it out, they can sell it, they can throw it on the seller's lawn if they know where the seller lives, they can do whatever they want with it. And if it costs them money, they can bring a legal action against the seller to recover those fees. Now, how do you enforce any of that? Well, it's not easy, but at least now it says what's to be done in the event, because we often get these questions. They left this behind, they left that behind, what do we do? Okay. All right, let's see what else we got. Oh yeah. So this is really important, and this comes up almost every day. I'm dealing with this right now. I'm the director of risk management for Compass and our approximately 6,000 agents in Northern California. And so there's not a day that goes by that I'm not dealing with measurements, right? Measurements of square footage that come in an appraisal. So the scenario is this: the buyers received the square footage and lot size advisory. They saw a few numbers that were in there. They said, okay. They removed their various contingencies, including their investigation contingency. They are getting a loan. Maybe they removed their loan contingency also. The appraisal comes back. And what does it show? It shows not 1,800 square feet, but it shows 1,400 square feet. And now they want to say, oh, that's a new material fact, I get to walk away. Well, it says right here in paragraph 8, the ability to cancel based on the measurements provided in an appraisal falls within the investigation of property contingency. The appraisal contingency is solely limited to the value determined by the appraiser. For any cancellation based on the appraisal contingency, buyer shall deliver a copy of the appraisal to the seller upon request. So there's two different things there, but the most important one is, hey, there may be new numbers here, but if you gave up your investigation contingency, don't come back to us when the appraiser comes back and gives a smaller number. You're on your own. Okay. All right. And the other thing it says here is that there's no obligation, and this is also reiterated in paragraph 12, there's no obligation for the buyer to provide to the seller the appraisal. The appraisal is not a report like the other reports that the buyer promises to give to the seller. The appraisal is not a report. There's no obligation to give it unless they're trying to cancel the contract based on the appraisal contingency. Okay, all right. And what about a new prelim? So we always have a new prelim. Even if we had a prelim in a disclosure packet, the first thing that happens, of course, after we get into contract and we advise the title company and the escrow company that we're in contract, they run a new prelim, right? So when that new prelim is provided to the buyer, does that give the buyer any rights to walk away? Well, we wanted to make sure that it was clear. And it says here now, no, you don't have any new rights to walk away. The only way you would have a new right to walk away is if that prelim discloses to you or reveals a new material fact, right? And what would be a new material fact? Well, I'll give you a good example. One good example would be, of course, an easement that didn't show up before that impacts the property, right? That would be a new material fact. All right, let's see what else we got. So speaking of new material facts, we've always had the contract telling us that in the event there is a new material fact which is discovered by the seller as opposed to discovered by the buyer. So a new material fact that's discovered by the seller during escrow, is the seller obligated to disclose that to the buyer? Yes. And does that give the buyer a cancellation right? Yes. Paragraph 11G tells us the buyer has 5 days. But what does the seller have to do? Well, it used to say the seller had to update the TDS or the SPQ. And then when that happens, the buyer has the 5 days. So what people used to do was, instead of updating the TDS or the SPQ, they just forward an email that says, hey, we have the new material fact, see attached. Or we have this email from the neighbor who's now claiming the following, which is a new material fact, here you go. And that was different from the updating the TDS or the SPQ. And so did they have the right to walk away? Well, this says that, hey, here's what you're going to do. You're going to promptly provide a subsequent or amended TDS, SPQ, or other document, which then gives the buyer the right to walk away within 5 days. So the other document is the addition here. And what could that other document be? It could be that email that you forward. Okay. All right. And if you want to keep reading, you'll see here in bold letters that a new material fact is not something discovered by the buyer during the buyer's own investigation. What about home fire hardening and defensible space? Well, fire hardening and defensible space, the FHDS form, is a disclosure, it's an addendum, and it's an advisory. It's a lot of things in one. It's a terrible form, we hate it, but if the property is in a high or a very high fire hazard zone, then there are special rules which apply. That form is set up to comply with those rules, and there are cancellation and contingency rights based on that. They're now in the contract here, paragraph 11C and D. Read up on it if and when you have a home that's in a high or very high fire hazard zone. As a listing agent, you want to find that out right away and then take the necessary precautions. Okay, we talked about this. Let's keep going. What about the notice to perform? So this is a little bit of a nuance, a little bit different. So remember that the notice to perform cannot be provided more than 2 days in advance. And that's different from the PRDS contract. For those of you who work down the peninsula, SFAR and CAR have the same provision that says, hey, before you can cancel a contract, you have to give the other side an opportunity to correct whatever it is they need to correct. Serve them with a notice to perform. And you have to give them at least 2 days. Likewise, if you're at the close of escrow, you're serving them with a demand to close escrow. And here that requires 3 days. So you have 2 days for notice to perform, 3 days for the demand to close escrow. But the contract always has said, and by the way, you can serve that in advance, but you can't serve it way in advance. You can only serve it 2 days in advance for the notice to perform, or 3 days in advance for the demand to close escrow. Okay? It still says that, but here's what it also says. And by the way, if you screw that up and you serve it too early, or if when you serve it, you change the time from 2 days to 1 day, or the demand to close escrow from 3 days to 2 days, well, you can't do that. And if you do, it's void and you got to start over. So this is, this is a bit of a gotcha, right? You thought you served an effective demand to close escrow or notice to perform, but you screwed it up and now it's ineffective and you got to start over again. Okay, all right. What about assignment? Can you assign the contract? Well, the contract now specifically allows for an assignment from the buyer to the buyer's own established trust or LLC, but it has to exist, right? You can't assign it to something that doesn't exist, right? So if you get into contract, your client, the buyer, has 17 days to set up one of those, and then they can assign it. And the seller can't object, but the seller can ask that the entity is pre-qualified or pre-approved, the same with any loan, or shows proof of funds if there are there's no loan contingency. Because just because the lender was willing to lend to Dan Hershkowitz and my wife Elisa, it doesn't mean the lender is necessarily willing to lend to the Hershkowitz Family Trust or to the Hershkowitz LLC that we established. So we still need to prove that, in fact, that it can be assigned and that the lender is accepting that assignment. And if the lender isn't accepting that assignment, then the contract is the contract. We're obligated to buy under our own specific names, right? All right. So that's one of the things that's required here. What if it's not to your own LLC? It's to somebody else. Can you assign? Yeah, you can assign, but the seller can reasonably disapprove of that assignment. What's reasonable? Well, it depends on who you're assigning to and what their assets are, I suppose, right? And the contract, like all of the other contingencies and requirements, is 17 days. So if the assignment comes after 17 days, the seller can say, no, you got to close under the name that you put into the contract. If you want to change title after close of escrow, that's entirely up to you. And why 17 days? Well, the reason there is often there was an assignment at the last minute and it delayed close of escrow. So the committee decided to put in a time frame Why 17 days? Well, we're good at 17 days. Okay, what about counting days? So paragraph 25 gives a very good example of how to count days. So whenever you see days with a capital D, that means that the date the thing happens is day 0 and tomorrow is day 1. And if it's a 15-day contingency, for instance, well, if we got into contract today, today's day 0, tomorrow's day 1, and we count every day between here and the 15th day. We don't skip over holidays. We don't skip over weekends. We just start counting days. And if the 15th day, however, lands on a weekend or a holiday, then we push out that obligation until the next non-holiday, non-weekend day. Okay, does that make sense? Now, what about serving a notice to perform? You can absolutely serve a notice to perform on a weekend or a holiday. The only thing is, if that notice to perform gave 2 days or 3 days, if that second day or that third day, whatever it is, fell on a weekend or a holiday, again, it gets pushed out to the first non-weekend, non-holiday day. Okay, got it? Okay. Now, what about delivery of documents? So this is a big deal. What is delivery? Well, delivery of documents is personal receipt. And what is personal receipt? That's a good question. So if I, for instance, am accepting buyer's offer, right? I'm the seller, I want to accept the offer. They give us until 3 o'clock today, and I'm looking at the clock, and it's 6 minutes to 3. So I got 6 minutes to send this thing off. Well, I have to deliver it. Okay, I can deliver it in the next 6 minutes. I'm going to attach it to an email. I'm going to send it. But it says delivery requires personal receipt. Well, what's personal receipt? Is it when it's in their inbox? Wait, I'm not sure. Is it when it's in their inbox and they open it? Is it when it's in their inbox, they open it and they read it and then they open the attachment? Wait, I don't know. And there was never known. And this was ripe for a debate. And so now the contract has changed and it allows, oh, we don't have that, sorry. There is, I'm trying to find it, sorry. Shoot, I don't have it here, I'm sorry. There's now a box on the last page where the brokers sign. It's a delivery of documents box. It's literally a box and it says, hey, if you enter something into that box, it says, this is where you deliver documents. And if you deliver documents to this address, we're not going to fight over personal receipt because we both agree that personal receipt was when you sent it to this address. So it's all you have to do is send it to the address that I'm designating, my designated receipt for documents address. And if you send it to that designated electronic delivery address, as it says here, okay, and that is on page 16 is the box. If you send it here, then the moment you send it, it's going to be deemed that I received it. And so what does this mean? This means that you got to check your box, right? And it also means that when you're sending something to someone's designated delivery address, what you should do is you should send it through DocuSign or something that has a receipt, right? And so it shows when it went out. And the moment it goes out, they got it. And so long as you send it to their designated electronic delivery address before that 3 p.m. deadline, you know that the acceptance happened. Okay? All right. Now, do you have to fill out a designated delivery address? No, you do not. So if you don't put anything in that box, then it's all back to personal receipt. And what is personal receipt? It's a little unknown. Okay? All right. Moving forward. And this is, by the way, this is the RCSD. This is the entities, right? So representative capacity signature disclosures, one for the buyer, one for the seller. It shows exactly how that would be filled out. So if you have an entity buyer, you fill out, you check this box, and then you say who the person is who's signing on behalf, right? What's the name of the legally authorized signer? What's the name of the corporation, LLC, trust, or partnership? You write here, okay? And the same for the sellers. Okay. All right, let's look at the grid. Oh, let's go back and look at these fancy graphics. Hold on. How about those fancy graphics? Okay, so here's the grid, right? Let's just go through real quick. We'll show how to fill it out. All cash offer, you check that box. You no longer have a loan contingency, for instance. Close of escrow, right? You fill it out here. Okay, so what about the initial deposit? Well, this is where you fill it out. And when does it have to be delivered? 3 or blank days. How does it have to be delivered? Well, it now defaults to by wire transfer. That's new. It used to say electronic transfer. And in talking with the various companies, they said, no, use wire. And so now it says wire. If you want to do something different, then you would check this box and fill in something different. Okay, loan amounts, here's where you'd fill it in. Now, you always need to give a figure here of the percentage, right? You don't want to leave this blank. Some agents leave the percent blank thinking they're doing their client a favor. They're not. Any discrepancy is going to be used against you, right? Because you filled this out and the seller's going to say, hey, you didn't fill in a loan amount. I'm sorry, a loan percentage. And I'm sure someone will give you this loan for 10%. So you're on the hook. But what about points? It now defaults to 0 points. Or if you have points, you can fill it in, but otherwise it defaults to 0, right? So what kind of a property is this? Well, now there's a couple of choices. It's defaults to your primary residence, or if checked, a secondary residence or an investment property. And that was the preferred terms that the lenders wanted us to use, secondary property or investment property. Okay, what about a seller credit? Well, if the seller's going to give a credit to the buyer and the buyer wants that, there's now a mechanism for asking for it. So if you want a $10,000 credit, just check this box and type in $10,000. What about our pre-qualifications? Well, I can attach them. And what can I attach? Well, I can tell you I'm attaching a pre-qualification, I'm attaching approval, pre-approval, or maybe I'm attaching something called a fully underwritten approval. What about assignment? Well, it's 17 or blank days. We showed that before. And this one is good. This is just like the San Francisco purchase agreement. And I want you to know this one. So if your client says, listen, I know it's a $2 million offer and I know we're in a rising market. I understand that the appraisal might come in a little bit low and I might have to put down more money, but I'm willing to do that, but not too much. So I need the appraisal to come in at least $1.9 million. It's all you do is check this box and write $1.9 million here. And now your appraisal contingency is not based on the purchase price, but based on $1.9 million. Do this. Don't try to figure out additional terms because it gets confusing and you always screw it up. Just check this box, put in the new amount, but of course, have a discussion with your lender before you do this to make sure that your clients, in fact, have enough money to qualify and can put it down, right? All right. Are we almost there? Yes, we are totally almost there. Time of possession, this is actually new. It used to always default to 6 p.m. on the date of close of escrow. It now, like the San Francisco purchase agreement, defaults to the notice of recordation. And when is that? That's when we get an email from the escrow telling us, congratulations, you're on record. Typically for a morning recording, that's sometime around 11 o'clock. So this is sort of a moving target. The seller needs to be able to get out in the morning, unless you check a box and put in something else. You could check this box and bring it back to 6 p.m. if you like. All right, and back to the tenant occupied property addendum. We talked about that. Every time you have tenant occupied property, please, 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 please include the tenant occupied property addendum. If you're a seller and they haven't included it in a counteroffer, include the tenant occupied property addendum. And did we do it? Yeah, we pretty much did it. There's a new term here that's a little gotcha that says, hey, you have to, seller, install smoke detectors, CO detectors, and do the water heater strapping and bracing. It used to say you had to do that before close of escrow. It now says you have to actually do that within 7 days, okay? And here's the various things that we talked about before: bathroom mirrors, wall-mounted brackets, if you want to include them, there it is. The contract now says that if you remove the TV, you also have to remove the wall-mounted bracket. Can't just leave all the brackets behind like you used to be able to. And when you remove the bracket, you got to patch the hole, but you don't have to paint. There's now boxes for video doorbells, smart home control devices, electric car charging stations. These were all issues, so we have added these boxes to make it clear these things also are included or not included, up to you. Okay, and finally, the allocation of costs. This is the section 3Q. It's all about who's going to pay for what. It's either the buyer, the seller, or if you check both, it says here by definition, both means you're splitting 50-50, okay? So you choose. And now the wording is much better with the government retrofit requirements. It was just so confusing before. It talked about retrofit, and there was this whole question about what is retrofit. And so now it says, listen, we're not talking about earthquake retrofit, we're talking about point of sale requirements. And so now the word retrofit is gone. And here in 3Q 5 and 6, it's all about who's going to pay for government required point of sale inspections and reports. That's one thing. Or the other thing is government required point of sale corrective or remedial action, which means we have a report that says you have to change the sewer lateral before close of escrow. And now we're deciding who's going to pay for that. Okay, I think that's it. I think we did it. Yes, we did. Regan, pardon me, we did it.
All right. I'll
So what I was unable.
Yay! Great job. Thanks,
Thank you.
Dan.
and
So
thanks for going a little overtime.
I did text one question to you that we already got, and then you can check your spreadsheet and we'll start getting the questions. Did you get that via text, or I could read it to you, Dan?
Why don't you read it to me? I was ignoring my text, trying to do a good presentation.
Yeah, I've got up on the screen right now.
That's fine. You did a great job.
I went ahead and keyed it in.
Okay. Well, what if you waive or remove the HOA contingency prior to changes to the HOA disclosed to the buyer? Does the change outlined in the contract create a new contingency?
So
That's from
remember
Heather
that.
Gonzalez with Compass.
Yeah. So one thing I do want to make sure we understand is that for most of these items, if you remove or waive a contingency and you didn't receive the particular documents that are related to that, the contract says, too bad, if those documents are available later and they're contractually required as opposed to statutory like the TDS, you've waived your right to get those documents. And even if they do provide them to you, you don't have a right to walk away. But if you actually received the HOA documents, and based on your review of those HOA documents, your client removes the HOA contingency, then the paragraph that then the question becomes, is this a new material fact, right? And although it's not as explicit as the San Francisco contract, which says specifically anything new in there, I would go back to paragraph 11 and say, okay, do we have a new material fact, which gives us a 5-day right? Sometimes there's going to be an argument between the parties and their lawyers whether or not it's material, but I would say that there's certainly an argument to be made that if it really does change something and you did receive the documents before which your client relied on and remove their contingency based on it, then your client now has a good argument to be made that this is a new cancellation right. And how long do they have? 5 days. Okay.
Okay. Well, let's see. I guess I just want to put a reminder. We have 3 ways to Q&A. So through the our Linktree link, linktr.ee/CREAA. There should be a link there to submit a question via Google form. Text it to Rebecca at 415-412-1977, or on Zoom, just raise your hand and I will unmute you. So we'll maybe give it a couple of minutes, see if folks got any questions. We still got 45 attendees on the line, so we'll give it a couple of minutes to see if anybody's got a question. Maybe in the meantime, Dan, maybe you might want to maybe throw in some other tidbits, sure. I guess.
Yeah, I'd be happy to throw in a couple of tidbits. I'm looking now at a separate screen of mine, which is talking about the distinctions between the SFAR and the CAR contract, right? So financing and appraisal are a little bit different. So remember I told you that the CAR contract makes a real distinction between the appraisal contingency and the finance contingency. And it specifically says, hey, if you don't have an appraisal contingency, then you can't claim later if the lender says, wait a minute, it didn't appraise, that you can't say, okay, I want to walk away. The San Francisco contract is silent. It just doesn't say anything. And so it's going to be a fight. We just couldn't get a consensus. So It doesn't say anything, and the PRDS contract says exactly the opposite. PRDS contract says, hey, even if you removed your appraisal contingency, if the property doesn't appraise and the reason the lender won't give you the loan is because of the appraisal, so long as you still have your lending or your loan contingency, you can walk away. So that's one distinction. Inspections and investigations. This is an interesting distinction. The CAR contract right next to the part in paragraph 3 that says you have a 17-day investigation contingency also reminds the parties that the buyer has 17 days to conduct informational access to the property. And so even if they had removed their investigation contingency, they still get to show up to the property for 17 days to walk around, not as a contingency, but they could bring inspectors with them for quote unquote informational purposes. The San Francisco contract works the opposite. It says in paragraph 12B, it says, hey, if you waive your right to the investigation contingency, you're also waiving your right to have informational access to the property. We'll see you again at the walkthrough, but not before. Okay, that's a distinction. There's some changes. There's some distinctions between the two contracts, between fixtures and personal property. The RPA talks about existing items. The San Francisco purchase agreement says specifically that only stuff owned by the seller is included in the sale. So that means that there's some obligation for a buyer to look through the house and say, hey, that thing that I want, is that really, I think it's a fixture, but who put it there? Maybe like drapes, right? Both contracts say all the window coverings, including drapes, are going to go with the sale, but because San Francisco contract specifically says only to the extent owned by seller, if the agent or a stager put up those drapes, then they're not going to remain behind. So we need to figure that out. Okay. Allocation of costs, I mentioned to you, is different. San Francisco has everything in paragraph 11, and they're already spelled out who pays for what. So if you want to change any of that, you actually have to use additional terms or a counteroffer, right? Whereas the CAR contract is all about checkboxes. So inside paragraph 3, I think it was Q, 3Q 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's who pays for all of those various items. And you're checking a box, buyer, seller, or both. Okay. Any questions arise?
I got a question from somebody.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, this person says, great job. And then secondly, they said, what are the pitfalls of preemptive offers?
Well, the biggest pitfall of preemptive as opposed to non-contingent. For a moment, I was thinking non-contingent. Okay, so here's the pitfall of the preemptive offer is, what service did you do to your client? So here's what's fascinating. If you took a survey, and this has been done, of agents who sell their own.
Wait, what do you mean? Which client? Disservice to the seller or disservice to the buyer?
To your own client. And so we'll talk about the two clients for a moment. You owe a fiduciary duty to your client, right? And so here's something that's interesting, Rebecca. Listing agents who are selling their own properties very rarely take a preemptive offer. So a listing agent who's selling their own property typically has the property on the market for some full period of time and are not taking quote unquote preemptive offers. So they're exposing the property to the market. But then of course, the next question is, what is a preemptive offer, right? So in working with a seller, the question is, am I going to expose the property to the whole market? Is this going to be an exclusive inside my own brokerage, right? Am I going to put this on the coming soon and we're going to try to sell it on the coming soon, never moving it from coming soon to active? All of these things must be discussed and agreed upon and verified in writing with your client ahead of time. And if you choose not to bring it to the market, well, then, you really need to make sure that your client has received comps, literally signed off on those comps, right? And then have a discussion with them where you say to them, listen, in many ways, I think it's better to bring it to the market. We'll never know. We'll never have an opportunity to give a multiple counteroffer. And it's very possible that later we'll regret what seemed like a great offer at the time because we never had more than one buyer bidding against each other. That's the issue. And the issue, of course, is that your clients don't remember any of that unless it's in writing. Or if and when they sell it, somebody will show up at their door and say, I saw the coming soon sign. It never went to the market. We were willing to give you $4 million. What happened? And then the answer is we sold it for $3 million. And they say, oh, that's terrible. We would have given you so much more. And now you're a villain. Okay. And then the other issue, of course, is if you're representing a buyer, right? It very well may be in a market like this, you're encouraging your buyer to pay a quote unquote premium. And you need to do the same thing with your buyer. You need to show your buyer the comps, show your buyer that it's arranged, make sure that your buyer is signing off on those comps.
I have another question. We hear a lot about NAR Rule 8. And I know Compass, for example, has a huge market share. And Taro, for whom I work, is big in the South Bay, and we get a lot of emails about that. What are kind of the pros and cons? Because I think if you're an agent with a company who does that, you can say, I can pre-market it to thousands of people, but then is that getting the most exposure? And is that fair or not fair? So can you kind of explain how to do that correctly, and if it's a good thing or bad thing, kind of your opinion on that? Because
sure,
some people think it's great and some people hate it. So I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are.
I think it's that exact same discussion. So when you talk about NAR Rule 8, what we're talking about is what we all know as clear cooperation. And the clear cooperation rule says that for those who are participants in their MLS, which is not a broker-owned MLS, and there are a couple of broker-owned MLSs in the area, Barry's being one of them. The rest of us have to comply with Rule 8, clear cooperation, which simply says that within 1 day of public marketing the property, it has to go in the MLS. Now, how it goes in the MLS, that's actually broadened, and it can go in as an active, or it can go into a coming soon or the equivalent that your particular MLS has. The idea is this: it's unfair that these properties are inside one brokerage, and we need some source, the MLS being the obvious source, for other agents to search and find them, because agents were sick of having to go to another broker's website and look for their coming soons, because the clients were doing that and saying to you, what about 123 Main Street? And you're saying, I don't know anything about 123 Main Street. And they were saying, well, I found it on the blank blank website, and you look like an idiot, right? And so now you only look like an idiot for one business day, because within one business day, it'll appear in your own MLS, and you can search your own MLS through hot sheets and see even the coming soons, right? So that's the whole idea. But there's this exception that swallows the rule. And that's what you're referring to, Rebecca. And that exception is, it's not public marketing if you keep it in-house. And keep it in-house really means keep it in-house. You can't put it on your social media. You can't put a sign out front that says coming soon. You can't tell anybody at another brokerage, and nor can any of the agents in your own brokerage. So you have to have some internal exclusive, right? And you have to label it as exclusive, so all the other agents know, yes, they can send this out to their clients, but they can only do that on a one-on-one basis. They can't send any mass emails, and neither can you. And if you do, then within one business day, it has to go in your MLS. And if it doesn't, it's a $5,000 fine here in San Francisco. So what are the pros and the cons? The pros and the cons are exactly what we just discussed. One of the pros is we get a little pre-marketing. We get to hear from the people in our office that go see it, maybe with their clients, right? Give you some feedback, right? Maybe you do, or maybe you don't accept offers. You and your client need to talk about that. Your client can tell you in writing that I'm not accepting offers. You need to communicate to everyone, don't give me an offer. And if you get one, don't give it to me. They need to do that in writing, right? Or they can say, if they bring an offer, they bring an offer. But you need to then remind your client that although many agents in my office saw this, we're only a small percentage of all of the agents out there and all of the buyers out there. If we don't go on the open market, then we're excluding those people. Is that a good idea? Well, statistics would show us that that's not a good idea. What do you want to do? Okay. Anything else?
So just as a follow-up, to protect myself, if I want to start talking about something, because I like to share with my friends, as long as I have it as coming soon versus incomplete, so that people can see it. I'm covered, and I won't get in trouble if I start blabbing about it on social media, even though it's
100%.
not active yet.
Right.
Okay, that's good.
And
Okay,
in
great.
San Francisco in particular, the coming soon can be for quite a long time. You can have it in coming soon for the duration of the listing agreement, right? Obviously, it couldn't go past the listing agreement, but you could have it in there for quite a long time until you bring it to market.
Okay, I got another question from Ann Chang with Sequoia Real Estate. She says, good seminar, thanks for putting together. Dan was about to explain the pitfall of non-contingent offers. Please ask him to continue with the topic since it happens so frequently in our market.
Sure. So the market conditions advisory should always be given. One of the things in the market conditions advisory is it says specifically that, hey, a non-contingent offer is very risky and it may be a bad idea. And a lot of firms have their own various advisories. Compass has one, for instance, called the non-contingent advisory. And it specifically says we're recommending against this. We understand that if you choose to do this, but by doing this, you're acting against our advice. And then it says what's a bad idea about it. And first and foremost, here's what's a bad idea about it. There's no cancellation right. There are no contingencies and therefore no cancellation right. You are accepting the property as it's been represented to you without any opportunity to investigate it. Or even if you use the CAR contract, which allows you to have inspections for informational purposes only, you have no right when you do, in fact, inspect it and find out something terrible to act on that meaningfully and walk away from the property. And so that's its biggest deal, right? And who do they blame later? They blame you later. Now, where do we have some problems? Often one of the problems that we have with a non-contingent offer is that you're making a non-contingent offer even though you haven't received all of the contractual documents, right? Do you in fact have everything the contract says you're supposed to have? Well, the contract says that with respect to contractual documents, if you waive the contingency and you never got the document, too bad, your client just waived that right. And that makes sense, right? You can choose not to get documents and take risks, right? But did your client really understand those risks? Did you even understand what you had and didn't have, right? And so the moment you make a non-contingent offer, that's really a problem. Here's one way, Rebecca, to help yourself from falling down this pitfall is if you make a non-contingent offer, don't simply send them the contingency removal form and check the all box, right? Don't check the all contingency box. Check each and every contingency individually, because that does two things. One is it reminds you of all the contingencies and you're like, oh shit, I forgot about the HOA contingency. Did I actually get all the HOA docs, right? And it reminds the client that they had all these contingencies. And so later they're going to be able to say, well, you just told me to check this all box. I didn't realize it was this, 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 and this. But instead now, in fact, they checked 13 separate boxes, right? And it's very hard or harder for them to say, I didn't understand that I was, in fact, waiving this right to these documents when specifically they checked that box.
Yeah, because a lot of times we just don't have all the condo docs. I sell a lot of condos, and one of the last ones, it took forever to get the condo docs. So people were wanting to do this and do that. And I even had one I sold where we didn't have the condo docs. And I countered that offer with a contingency to review the doc. I didn't want it to be non-contingent, even though it was cash. I said, you haven't seen the condo docs. You need to look at them. And I made that, even though I represented the seller, I wanted to protect the buyer and make sure nobody got mad at anybody. So I put that in the counter. They're going, well, we already moved our contingency. I go, I gave you one. Right. I just think we have to be responsible to both parties and really explain that, because in a seller's market, it's really difficult to be a buyer without being non-contingent. And the main things for that are inspections and loan contingencies. But there's other little things here and there that we may not know about. So I think that's a great idea. So I want to thank Dan for bringing that up.
I'll give you one example that just you reminded me when you said the loan contingency. People often forget that the loan contingency is not just approval of the financial wherewithal of the buyer, which is easy to figure out, right? My wife and I make enough money that we can totally afford this $1.5 million house, let's say, right? And I'm not worried about my loan contingency. But what if this $1.5 million house is actually a townhouse and part of an HOA? The lender is not just approving me and my wife and our financial wherewithal. The lender has to approve the HOA and the HOA insurance. And what if the lender doesn't? I don't have a contingency, right? And I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh, right? So some of these things we got to actually think through, right? And that's one good example right there. And by the way, when I sold my parents' house last year in Florida, we got an offer from a builder who was moving, and he wanted to remodel the house for him and his wife. This is in Florida. They were moving from Minnesota, right? And he's like, oh, I've done my own inspection. And I knew he wasn't going to do one because he was still in Minnesota. But I countered back just as you did, and I gave him a 7-day investigation contingency. And I put in the counteroffer, we want you to do investigations. We're encouraging you to do investigations, and we're giving you a 7-day investigation contingency.
I got one more question kind of related to this from the same 408 person. Aren't these in-house, off-market, dual agency, and non-contingent offers promote the chance of post-sale litigation versus tradition 7-day listings on the MLS with the 3 to 5 day contingency for property investigation periods? I think you basically said that, but I guess they're just wanting clarification.
Sure. You ready for the answer? Yes.
It's just that simple.
It doesn't mean that anything. It doesn't mean that anything's been done wrong, but does it increase the possibility? Absolutely. Yes, it does.
Yeah, I think we need to wrap up. We've already gone nearly half an hour past our time. Dan, you are just a wealth of information. You're so magnanimous with your sharing of your knowledge and your time. And on behalf of the Chinese Real Estate Association, I just really, really want to say we appreciate you. I'll remind everyone else that on March 13th coming up is our installation banquet for Tina. Tina Finn is our president, the rest of us on the board. We also have events coming up in April. Sometime we're going to have the top producer panel. The end of April, we have, I just closed my sheet thing. Let me get that back up real quickly.
It's on the screen,
hold on, guys.
Rebecca. It's on the screen.
Oh, okay. Well, in addition to the top producer panel in April, we're also going to have a kind of a social media technology event on Wednesday, April 27th at Edie Obas. In May, we do have a casino night, and we're also having, that's going to be probably Cinco de Mayo. And then Scott Wiener and Gordon Marr are going to talk about ADUs with the SB 10. And Gordon Marr has some information on financing the construction of ADUs. So not all the events are on there, but we have about 2 events a month for April and May. The top producer panel, I think Stephen Wong's going to be on that. Hopefully Damon Knox, our president-elect for this year, will be the MC. But just go to our website, CREAAUSA.org, CREAUSA.org. All of our events are there. You can reach out to me, to Tina, to Reagan, to anyone on the board, like Sonia, whoever you know, just reach out to us. We'll tell you about our events. Regan posts some of these in his LinkedIn. I post them on my Facebook. But anything we got going on, we'll let you know about. I just want to maybe, if I can just give one last round of applause for Dan and say thank you. And we'll see you guys hopefully next Sunday, March 13th, at our big, huge gala. And of all the galas there are for all the organizations, this one is the most fun. We're getting close to being sold out. If you don't have a ticket, get your ticket now. It's all you can eat Chinese food. We've got wine. We've got raffles. It's just fun. There's going to be a lion dance, a live band. All kinds of great things are happening. And everybody you see there is going to be installed. So we'll see you all next Sunday. And Dan, big kisses. Thanks again so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you again.
100% my pleasure. Thank you for including me. Bye,
Thank you,
everybody.
Dan.